again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm your host today, John, so thanks for being here. Good topic today. Let's get right to it. People who live in small towns. What's a story that everyone knows, but no one likes talking about? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The superintendent of my hometown school district got a DUI in a school zone and used his wealth and influence in the community to not only get out of jail time, but to get the arrest completely scrubbed from his criminal record. He sued multiple people for slander for mentioning it publicly because, as far as the official record is concerned, it never happened. In my town, we had the mayor's daughter drive drunk through a pizza place and get out of the car and walk up to the counter and try to order. It was on the news for like one day and then disappeared completely. The place just opened back up. There's a dungeon under the abandoned yellow house in the park that was used by the current owner's great-grandfather. He admitted on his deathbed that he was the cause of 13 disappearances from the 1910s to the 1930s. Issue is, we don't know who the 13 victims are, since the surrounding area has had hundreds of disappearances over the decades, and we have nothing to go off of except a period of nearly 30 years. Plus, no one wants to think about a relative or ancestor being locked up in there. There's a statue of a volunteer firefighter at the corner of the village's busiest intersection. He was memorialized for being selfless and being the embodiment of being a good neighbor. Nobody ever talks about, though, that when he was alive, they called him Richie the Retard. A gazebo was removed from the town green because it became a place late at night where people were regularly caught having sex. It was a beautiful gazebo with comfortable benches like church pews where people could relax in the warm weather and enjoy the town green. But no more. Well, sounds like those benches might have been a little too comfortable. One day I see a bunny, but like a huge bunny. I thought it was a normal size, but as I got closer I realized I was wrong. Thing was an absolute unit, like medium-sized dog. As time went on, I would occasionally see more and more of these gigantic, mutated rabbits. So, turns out this guy had a couple of pet giant rabbits and then moved out to college. The official story his parents gave him was that his beloved pet rabbits got sick like a week after he moved out and had to be put down. Dude was devastated. My guess is that the rabbits weren't put down and were instead released. Now, I'm not sure if Flemish giants can interbreed with wild bunnies, but everyone swears that even the local bunny population is composed of mega bunnies, and the parents are low-key kind of hated by everyone now for being dicks to their child. Around 3 years ago, a young lesbian couple came up missing. They found their car half submerged in the river but no signs of the girls. They found them a week later in the river dead with bullet wounds in their heads. It devastated the town when it happened, but I feel like it got covered up so quickly it wouldn't scare off any tourists. They made a small memorial near the river for the girls, and it's been vandalized beyond repair twice now. In the other town I lived in, the mayor's wife killed an elderly couple on Christmas Eve while driving drunk. She never did any time. Completely swept under the rug, but he didn't get re-elected, thankfully. Change of tone on this one, but I figured I'd share anyway. I grew up in a tiny farm town in Pennsylvania. On Christmas Eve, one of the local farmers would go to all the houses with kids and climb on the roof and walk around for a minute or two to keep our belief in Santa alive and well. It's hilarious, because he never asked, just always did it every year. It obviously wasn't talked about much, so that the kids never caught on, but was truly so cute. In what was once voted the most beautiful small town in America, a police officer was driving home at the end of his shift when, on an off-ramp, he encountered a bunch of brush inexplicably placed in a roadway blocking his path. When he got out of his cruiser to clear it, he was assassinated by a killer with a shotgun. That was in 2013, and the case has yet to be solved. Worse yet, it unwound a mire of controversy and conspiracy. A year later, a mother and daughter were found brutally murdered. The mother shot multiple times and the daughter bludgeoned and her throat slit. A year after that, a 35-year-old woman went missing, and a little over a year later, that woman's father was shot to death on his own property while hunting. Theories abound about the connections between these 4 unsolved cases: local government, corruption, intimate affairs, and murder plots. And the FBI now maintains a near constant presence in this small Kentucky town of only 12,000 citizens. All of this in Bardstown, Kentucky. The Bardstown podcast does an excellent job of breaking it all down. Young local lawyer is kidnapped in the middle of the night at gunpoint and ordered to tie up her husband. There's a man in jail for the kidnapping, but she has never been found. Happened in the early 90s, and the theory is she was killed to cover up corruption in the court system. She was supposedly going to the DA about some shady shit. Two guys robbed one of those car compacting places where they mash up old vehicles into giant metal bricks. They went in at night, dropped off by their girlfriends to go get parts and scrap to sell, I guess. They'd done it before. The owner found out and waited for them one night. Shot both in the backs of the head, put their bodies in a car and crushed it up. The truck didn't come to pick up the metal for a couple of days, so the one with their bodies sat out in the heat. The officers only found them after the girlfriends telling the police they dropped them off there and couldn't find them again. They checked the place and found them from the smell. I remember before the two guys were found, missing posters of them were all over the town. That some of the large apartment blocks built in the last 15 years are either unsafe or illegal. It came out a few years back that a member of our local government in charge of checking building regulations was frequently sleeping with and accepting bribes from all the major building companies. She then fled out of state, and all the other party members had to clean up after her. Back then, way less people had moved down here, so no one really took any notice outside of the local news outlets, but I still think about all that building built too close to each other, or how some are still being found to be unsafe. There is a family in my hometown that nobody talks to. My grandma has a small bar and doesn't allow them in. The reason is because the children are all products of incest. The two parents are brother and sister. Then she had a baby with her dad. They had multiple children, and when they got older, they had children with their children. It's effing disgusting. The son of a well-respected doctor got high on mushrooms and stabbed his father to death. He also blinded the doctor's partner too. He only got 5 years, which I think is a damn shame. The doctor was liked by everyone and was incredible in his field. A lot of people have just stopped going for colonoscopies, etc. because he was the best, and the other doctors in town just don't compare. There's an auto plant where a large percentage of men worked during the 40s to 70s. The plant has shut down now and gave out great pensions, but it doesn't matter much because a large percentage of the men who worked there developed cancer. Former employees keep lists of coworkers who died from cancer. Our town has unofficially been nicknamed the Town of Widows. Years ago, an employee of a small nutrition shop abducted 2 female customers. He forced them into the store's basement, repeatedly assaulted them, and then took them to his home, where he confined them. He also cut off their hair. I drive past both the shop and the home quite often, and it always gives me the creeps. I can't believe that the store is still in business, and that other people have moved into that house. There's a formerly respected lawyer in my hometown that's been practicing since the 70s and has been involved in a sex trafficking circle for decades. My town has a big drug and poverty problem, so when women who were in trouble for drugs would come to him as clients, he would offer them drugs or lenient sentences because of his legal connections in exchange for prostitution. The worst part is that police, judges, parole officers, and other respected men in the community not only knew or at least suspected what he was doing, but many of them took part in it. So the women could never turn to local law enforcement because of the corruption. An article was published last year that went viral in my hometown, but as far as I know, the lawyer is still being investigated. So not super small town, but still something everyone knows but is getting swept under the rug. My high school has a legacy of teachers dating and marrying former students. The journalism teacher was let go after being accused by multiple women over many years of sexual abuse. Everyone knew he was a creep, but no one except the victims knew his creepiness went beyond putting a hand on a student's thigh or giving shoulder rubs. Still wildly inappropriate, but the admins knew, and nothing ever happened, so none of the students thought to take it any further. After a short review, his teaching license was reinstated in Georgia, and he is free to do this to other women. He was married to a former student for a brief time as well. The German teacher was sleeping with a student of age when it came out, but there is suspicion it didn't start when she was 18. It came out and his wife left him and moved with their kids. He blamed the student and then quit shortly after. One of the admins is married to a former student. They got engaged the day after her graduation and married shortly after. When I graduated, she had just started teaching there despite seeming way underqualified compared to the other teachers in the department. He was also very close with the other two teachers. I mean, that's certainly a lot of situations of students marrying teachers, etc. I don't know if there's a connection, but maybe in small towns there's less of a dating pool, and if everyone's 18, I guess it's all good, but there is that stigma. There's a pretty influential guy in town who works for a pretty big local company, and his wife committed suicide a few years back. We also have another pretty big wig, and he broke up with his missus because she caught him having sex with a man. One of the managers of a pretty big local hotel is a crossdresser. Another local hotel is owned by an elderly couple in their 60s, elderly, and the man likes to have sex with twinks. His receptionist is a 19-year-old guy who got a brand new 1 Series BMW as a Christmas gift from the hotel owner. A local village 5 miles out of town is famous for having a really high incidence of cousins marrying and thriving swinger community. There's a famous family in the area who is known to have practiced cannibalism during World War II food shortages. One of the local taxi companies is a front for a drug dealing operation. They only serve people they know, and a 2-mile taxi ride with them is about $50. My hometown is a tiny place 45 minutes south of Edmonton, Alberta, has multiples. There's this infamous 4, one of them I grew up with for years, that killed a chick threatening to rat out Hell's Angels. Dumb move on her part, to be honest. The woman who drowned her 2 boys in the bathtub then tried to commit suicide in Edmonton by jumping from a bridge. She was deported back to Australia after being apprehended, later committed suicide. A guy was shot and left on a back road between my town and the next one over. Literally no one or media coverage other than the initial body of a middle-aged man was found. My step-sibling's mom dated a guy a little later after her separation from my now stepdad, and she decided she didn't see it working out and tried ending it. Not sure of the details, but I guess he was like severely attached to her, like stage 8 clinger type thing, and he cornered her at her house the one day and threatened to kill himself if she didn't at least talk to him, and she refused to let him in the house. And, well, he shot himself with a shotgun in her backyard. Poor woman. My typical little farm town looks pretty plain, basic, and like we'd be one big happy family that's portrayed in movies as a cookie-cutter community. When you drive through it, you never even guess that you just drove through a one big dirty secret that hides behind smiles and wide-open welcoming arms. Don't live there anymore, but some kid across the street from my dad killed himself the other day. Young kid was like 20. Apparently he had court dates for sexually assaulting or something. We just renting a room there, so there were cops there questioning all the roommates for a day or two. Probably a couple came in on call because there is like one cop around on duty unless it's a holiday or something. The school janitor killed his girlfriend through autoerotic asphyxiation. The high school principal cheated on his wife with a teacher. The vice principal cheated on his wife with a guidance counselor. A family that's mixed race wrote the N-word on their house, claiming it was racist members from the football team. The mom actually did it to get her son into a higher grade school. One of the kids, who just graduated in my class, did a drive-by shooting this past Monday of another student because the kid wouldn't buy weed from him. If I remember any more good ones, I'll add them. There was a creep in our town everyone knew about and warned their kids about. The front door of his house had a dirty diaper taped to it. He had no kids. One day he invited 2 girls into his house to see the new kittens, and he exposed himself to them. Luckily, they ran out of there and nothing else happened. His house stank like shit from the outside. The guy I used to go to school with murdered a guy because the guy was his secret lover and was running his mouth. His family's well connected, lawyers, and had it covered up to look like a hit and run. Their little brother was driving a boat while drunk and inadvertently killed a girl. Also got away with it, and he didn't have a boating license and was also not tested for alcohol. Everybody knows the truth, but nobody can do anything about it. Thank God I got out years ago. I come from a small Midwestern town in the middle of nowhere, and people keep disappearing. It started when I was pretty young, 5 to 6, not really sure on the specifics, but I do remember noticing a teacher went missing. Being 5 to 6, we all assumed she was moved until I overheard my mother and aunt talking about how no one knew where she went. Fast forward a few years, the local government store owner vanished, and then a pair of hunters, then a few kids from the grade up. I've never seen a newspaper article or police report of any of them, not even missing persons report. No one seems to talk about it, but we all know what is happening. There was a family that took in a lot of foster kids, by all accounts a very loving mother and father. At the time, they had 2 kids of their own and were fostering 3. It came out that their biological son, 18, was having sex with one of their foster sons, 13. It was as consensual as a relationship between an 18 and 13-year-old could be. I believe because the issues of statutory rape, the family lost the ability to foster anymore. They left the town after not too long. There's a medical group in my town that has slowly bought all the other hospitals in the area and closed critical locations in other smaller towns to require that they be flown via helicopter to my town for treatment. They also run their own insurance company. They have lobbied for law changes to prevent them from being ruled a monopoly and lobbied city governments to make it criminal to protest them, and most recently, their CEO was placed on a board governing charter schools. In private, people hate them and want them gone. But the people with money and power believe that this organization is going to improve our area. People are dying, being mistreated, and shame for seeking medical attention. Our area is deteriorating rapidly. There are more addicts and criminals now because it's harder to find employment outside of the medical conglomerate and/or find affordable healthcare in my area now. I guess this plays right into the bad side of capitalism in a way where if you can't beat the competition, just buy them. The bullying is so bad at the schools that there was a suicide epidemic a few years ago. Even teachers were involved in bullying students. My friend's 9-year-old stepsister is currently being bullied at the school, looks the other way. Her parents are considering having her switch schools because nothing else has worked. My town had an infant go missing, allegedly abducted by the father. The sheriff arrested him, but he swore he has no idea where the baby was. They searched and searched and searched all over the country for months, but never found it. They eventually charged the father with murder, and despite the fact that there really wasn't any evidence, he was sentenced. He spent 5 years in prison and finally admitted to killing the baby, but wouldn't tell investigators where the body was. He committed suicide in prison a short time ago. Meanwhile, the mother has had several more children, and each has been taken away by the state for neglect or abuse. She's currently under investigation for breaking her 11-month-old collarbone. Everyone in town knows she did it, but no one is willing to say it out loud. A church had opened a private school, which had been running along fine for about 25 years. Sometime in the late 90s, I think, the administrator was getting a little too power-hungry and too corrupt, and was asked to resign after being told several times that was overstepping her boundaries. She left at the end of the school year, but had told as many parents and potential families as she could that the school was closing after the year, and that she was opening another one. She had the office phones forwarded to her own phone, started enrolling students in a new school, and one day drove a U-Haul truck to the building in the middle of the night and stole pretty much everything that wasn't bolted down to the floor. Anyone who attended the school while she worked there will still say she was insane, but no one else ever wants to talk about it. Our superintendent is married with 3 kids. 2 are still in our school system. My senior year of high school, it comes out that he's cheating on his wife with his personal trainer, who is a man. Also, my senior year, a middle school student brought a gun to school to kill his teacher. Guess he got cold feet, then got caught with the gun. I'm not entirely sure. We also had a bomb threat when I was in elementary school. They had to evacuate the high school for the entire day. It was a huge deal. Everyone's sitting at the football field while parents are notified, which makes them go crazy wanting to get their kids. My junior year, we had a good old copycat try to redo the whole bomb threat thing. Our school didn't even tell any of us, it just spread by word of mouth. A week later, they sent home a letter. Yes, there was a threat. We apprehended her. No big deal. I don't live in a small town, but it's definitely one that when people ask where I'm from, I usually get a "where's that?" Anyways, there was one Christmas Eve where my mom was up late in the evening room wrapping some gifts when all these emergency vehicles came speeding down our street. Cop cars, ambulances, paramedics, you name it. She thought it was weird, as we usually never have anything too extreme happen here. We see an ambulance or a cop car on occasion, but it's pretty rare. She ended up going to bed, and we found out the next morning that some guy down the street from us crashed his ex-wife's Christmas party and not only shot 9 people, but set the house on fire with a homemade flamethrower before killing himself. It was on a ton of news sites. You can probably find it if you look it up, but it has rarely come up ever since.